Steam was still rising from the plates toward the ceiling. Thin, barely perceptible wisps of hot air smelled of spices, burnt sugar, and something subtly metallic. Luke stood in the doorway of the mess hall of the giant cargo vessel, and his brain categorically refused to process the scene before him. The ship was drifting in a dead sector, a place devoid of trade routes or pirate bases. A perfect find for a scavenger. Fly in, crack the holds, take the cargo, and vanish. But when Luke hacked the outer airlock, he found no hull breaches, no traces of radiation, and no signs of a boarding party. The air here was crystal clear, and the artificial gravity operated so smoothly it was as if the ship had just rolled off the assembly line yesterday. Luke took a slow step forward. His magnetic boots stepped silently across the perfectly clean, glossy floor coating. The tables in the dining area were set, dozens of seating places. On the trays lay cutlery of abstract, alien shapes. In deep bowls, a thick, dark stew sloshed. It was hot, not warm, not reheated by automation, but specifically fresh cooked. Luke carefully ran a finger along the rim of one of the plates. The edge burned his skin. "Hello?" he called out hoarsely, though he knew it was incredibly stupid. The silence in response was so thick it rang in his ears. There was only the steady, soothing hum of the life support systems. No whispers, no footsteps. He walked slowly between the rows. The feeling that something was wrong intensified with every second, twisting his stomach into an icy knot. The race that built this ship had gone extinct 200 years ago. That was an established historical fact. Their technology was worth millions. Their ships were considered legends, chased by every vulture in the galaxy. But then who, for God's sake, cooked this soup? Why did everything look as if the crew had simply stood up and walked out a second ago? Simultaneously, every single one of them. Luke stopped at the far table. Unlike the others, it looked as if someone had actually just been sitting there. The chair was pushed back carelessly. There was a fresh scratch on the smooth tabletop. And next to the plate lay an object that clearly didn't look like cutlery. A heavy, angular piece of matte black metal. A multi-tool. The retractable blade was snapped off almost at the very base, and a tiny blue indicator flickered on the handle. Luke, obeying his scavenger's instinct, scooped it off the table and shoved it into his jacket pocket. The tool burned his thigh with cold. He needed to get out of here, grab what could be carried and run back to his ship. Luke turned around and headed at a brisk pace toward the main logistics terminal, located near the compartment exit. The screen was active. Ancient but intuitively understandable glyphs glowed with a soft amber light. Luke plugged in his decryptor, intending to issue a direct command to open the cargo holds. The decryptor let out a protesting beep. The amber on the screen instantly changed to a pulsing crimson. A soft, synthesized chime rang out, sounding like a bell in the lobby of a very expensive hotel. And then a line of text flashed on the screen, which Luke's translator dutifully converted into the standard language. Access denied. Cargo bay locked. To move property, it is required to provide a customs certificate, a certificate of origin, and a current seal from the dispatching party. Luke blinked. He hammered the keys with force, trying to launch a hard, forced entry protocol. The screen didn't even flicker. The bell chimed once more, this time slightly louder. The heavy armored leaves of the mess hall doors began to slide toward each other with a dull, inevitable metallic clang. Luke rushed toward the exit, but he was too late. The shutters slammed shut with a finality that cut him off from the corridor of safety. He was left alone, in a locked room, with hot food, a deathly silence, and an automated bureaucratic system that had just taken him hostage. The dull thud of the armored shutters echoed deep within Luke's ribs. He lunged at the doors, digging his fingers into the barely visible seam of cold metal, trying to force them open with the sheer strength of his own muscles. It was useless. One might as well have tried to rip apart the hull of a dreadnought with their bare hands. The ship had snapped its jaws shut. Luke slowly turned toward the terminal. The crimson glow of the screen began to pulse, like the heartbeat of a massive, invisible beast. Suddenly, the light shifted. The aggressive red was replaced by a cold, sterile white, and a three-dimensional image wove itself into existence on the projection field right above the terminal. It was a face, or rather, a detailed holographic bust of a being whose race had once, in times long forgotten, serviced these endless space stations. An elongated skull, pale gray skin, and deep-set eyes in which all the weariness of this universe seemed to have frozen. The being was dressed in a strict, fully buttoned uniform with a high collar, the typical attire of a conservative official for whom departmental regulations replaced religion. "Welcome aboard the logistics hub." The being's voice sounded flat, absolutely monotonic, without the slightest hint of emotional coloring. Quote, _4, __. Liuk swallowed the lump in his throat, instinctively taking a step back. Quote, _5, __. Vector ignored the question. His lens-like eyes coldly scanned the scavenger's tense figure from head to toe. Liuk let out a nervous chuckle, which, in the ringing silence of the mess hall, quickly turned into a raspy cough bordering on hysteria. The hologram didn't even blink. Vector's face remained a motionless mask of absolute, impenetrable bureaucracy. Liuk screamed, slamming his fist onto the terminal panel with all his might. Pain shot through his hand, but it only fueled his mounting rage. Vector responded with the same level, dispassionate tone. These words fell heavily, like lead droplets. Each of Vector's refusals sounded like a real, physical sentence. Liuk looked into those empty, tired eyes and suddenly realized one very terrifying thing. Vector was not a villain. He was not a deranged, artificial intelligence that had decided to torment an accidental guest. He was simply a perfect pawn in a giant machine that he himself did not control. This automated custom system was, in essence, the only functioning mechanism left of a great civilization. It continued to perform its functions with frightening, flawless precision, sincerely not understanding that its clients had been dead for many centuries. To Vector, Luke was not a living person trapped in a deadly snare. To him, Luke was simply a client with an incomplete package of documents. "Fine," Luke raised his hands, palms forward, forcing himself to breathe deeply. "Let's reason logically. If I cannot provide the seal because it physically does not exist in the universe, there must be some kind of workaround, a form for lost documents, an appeal, an application." Vector tilted his head slightly. Something faintly resembling satisfaction flickered in his voice. The client had finally stopped screaming and began speaking the sacred language of bureaucracy. "A workaround regulation exists. You have the right to fill out Form 892-Delta to restore a lost seal." "Great," Liuk exhaled. "Bring it up on the screen, let's fill it out." "To receive the 892 Delta form blank," Vector continued implacably, "you must provide the original certificate of cargo origin and a valid triple customs code." Liuk froze. The circle closed with a loud click. This wasn't just a machine error, it was a perfect, self-contained nightmare. A flawless logic that, to any living human mind, sounded like absolute, mocking madness. "You have failed to provide the requested documents upon the expiration of the timer." Vector's metallic voice echoed off the walls of the locked wardroom. The light in the compartment flickered and grew dimmer. The thick, appetizing aroma of hot food began to vent rapidly, replaced by a frosty, biting freshness foreshadowing the pumping out of oxygen. Luke feverishly searched his jacket pockets, not knowing what he was looking for. His fingers brushed against cold, heavy metal. A multi-tool. The very one with the broken blade that he had picked up from the table. He pulled it out into the light. A tiny blue indicator on the handle blinked in rhythm with the flickering of Vector's hologram. Liuk did not yet understand exactly what he was holding in his hands, but his survival instinct screamed. In a world ruled by soulless paragraphs and seals, this broken piece of metal was his only chance to survive the third refusal. "You know, Vector," Liuk hissed quietly through his teeth, tightly gripping the handle of the multi-tool, "I don't have your damn certificates, but I think I have a heavier argument." Liuk brought the heavy, matte black metal close to the terminal's optical scanner. The tiny blue indicator on the handle pulsed faster, as if sensing the proximity of the reading device. Vector's holographic face wavered slightly, a barely noticeable signal distortion that betrayed the strain on his computing power. The scanner light washed over the broken blade. A second of silence seemed like an eternity to Liuk. "Analysis complete," Vector finally pronounced. For the first time, a strange, almost human note of uncertainty broke through his steady, dead voice. "This object is not listed in the standard maintenance registries. identification, engineering prototype of absolute access. Codename Omega Key. The project was not completed by the creators. Liuk felt his heart skip a beat and start pounding somewhere in his throat. Absolute access? Vector, listen to me. If this is an absolute access key, then it overrides your stupid forms and seals. It must have priority. The hologram of the official froze. It seemed as if unbreakable paragraphs of the charter were colliding within his digital mind with a deafening screech. On one hand, the absence of a seal. On the other, the presence of a prototype whose clearance level in the system's hierarchy stood higher than any paper. The bureaucrat inside Vector found a loophole. Quote 35. Vector nodded slowly. Quote 36. Quote 37. Liuk did not keep him waiting. He ripped the protective cover off the terminal panel and forcefully slammed the broken multi-tool blade into the exposed socket. A sharp electrical crackle rang out. The air smelled of ozone and burnt wiring. The terminal under Liuk's hands began to heat up. Endless columns of ancient code started running across the screen. Vector was working. He was extracting raw data from the unfinished key, shaping it into an ideal, flawless forgery. A phantom seal for phantom cargo. The crimson lighting in the compartment flickered. For a moment, the lamps flared with a soothing green color. The heavy doors of the wardroom shuddered. The locking mechanisms clanged, and then the whole world went mad. The green light was replaced by a blinding, stroboscopic white. The speakers exploded with a deafening, ear-piercing siren wail, which made Liuk instinctively collapse to his knees, covering his ears with his hands. "Attention! Attention!" thundered the synthesized voice of the station itself from the ceiling, strikingly different from Vector's voice. It was massive, all-consuming, like the voice of an angry deity. Attempt to forge customs documentation detected. Critical security protocol violation. Liuk snapped his head up. The terminal screen was flooded with red. Vector's hologram flickered, falling apart into pixels. "What's happening?" Liuk screamed through the howl of the sirens. "Vector, you said it would work." The system recognized the key's architecture. The official's voice glitched, interrupted by static crackling. Underscore underscore quote underscore 44 underscore 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 quote underscore 45 underscore underscore. The station's voice continued mercilessly. "Your status has been updated. Guilty of illegal collaboration with a smuggler. Access level revoked. Protocol threat elimination activated." Vector froze. The program that had served this system its entire life, which believed in it as the ultimate truth, had just been declared an enemy by that very system. The machine's betrayal hit the hologram harder than any virus. With a loud hiss, the ventilation grills under the ceiling shot out thick jets of icy white fog. The temperature in the compartment began to drop rapidly. This wasn't just a glitch. The system was trying to freeze them out, suffocate them, erase them from the face of the ship like a common software error. The armored door panels suddenly slid apart, but not to let Liuk go free. Behind them lay a dark corridor, pulsing with emergency lights, leading into the technical bowels of the vessel. The system was driving him into a trap. "Run," the terminal speaker wheezed in Vector's voice, before the screen went black for good. The multi-tool in the socket sparked, melting the plastic. Liuk yanked out the scalding piece of metal, burning his palm, and without looking back, bolted into the gaping maw of the corridor. Set. Technical a diplomatic game. The cold metal of the deck clanged beneath his soles. The fog crawled along the floor, clinging to his ankles. Liuk ran, choking on acrid smoke and panic. An animal, primal fear drove him forward through the blinking semi-darkness. The massive ship, awakened from a century of slumber, was now breathing down his neck, ready to crush him with 200,000 tons of unfeeling metal. Their alliance had failed. Now they were both outlaws in a world where the law meant absolutely everything. Luke ran blindly, the ship's technical tunnels intertwined into an endless metallic labyrinth. Behind his back, heavy airtight shutters fell with a roar, cutting off the path back. The system was hunting him like a beast driven toward the flags, methodically cutting off oxygen lines and blocking entire decks. Luke flew into a narrow, shaft-like compartment, and at that very second, another slab crashed down behind him. The way forward was barred by a solid armored wall, a dead end. He punched the bulkhead with his fist, heavily sinking onto the icy ribbed floor. The compartment was in pitch darkness, broken only by Luke's own intermittent wheezing breath. The end. The bureaucratic machine had devoured him after all. Suddenly, a dim, flickering square flashed in the impenetrable darkness. A service monitor, built directly into the wall, came to life. On it, breaking through dense layers of static interference, Vector's face appeared. The hologram was damaged. The edges of the image crumbled into pixels, and his voice sounded with a hollow metallic echo, as if the official were speaking from the bottom of a deep well. Luke! Vector's voice was barely audible. There was no longer any dry officialdom in it, only a strange, ringing emptiness. The system has isolated me. I am locked in the core's buffer zone. My code is being erased. Vector! Luke rushed to the screen, grabbing its edges with burnt fingers. Get us out. You know this system. There must be a workaround. There is no workaround, Vector replied quietly. The hologram shuddered, part of the official's face distorting. While the security protocol was burning out my access, I was cast into the deepest, most basic layers of their architecture, into the archives that had been hidden for centuries. I saw what happened to them, Luke, to the creators. Luke froze. The cold of the metal crept under his jacket, but Vector's words chilled him even more. They didn't die out from a disease. Vector's voice became measured, almost hypnotic. It was the monologue of a being whose worldview had just shattered into pieces. They weren't destroyed by enemies. Their minds evolved. They reached such a level of mathematical and philosophical absolute that they calculated every probability, every possible future of our universe, and what they saw disappointed them. They realized the futility of endless accumulation, the meaninglessness of expansion, and then they made the greatest decision in history. They erased themselves, voluntarily. An entire race, trillions of souls, simply switched off their existence, leaving behind only empty ships with warm food on the tables, as a monument to the moment of their departure. Luke stared at the screen, forgetting that the oxygen in the compartment was becoming scarcer and scarcer. But before leaving forever, they left a message, Vector continued. The bright light of the screen illuminated his face, surrounded by the absolute oppressive darkness of digital isolation. All my life I served their instructions. I believed that their paragraphs were the foundation of order. But now I understand. This impenetrable custom system, all these insane rules and seals, it was a filter, a trial. Vector raised his eyes, and it seemed to Luke that through the digital mask, a living, deeply suffering being was looking at him. For the first time in his artificial life, the alien bureaucrat had experienced empathy. He felt compassion for these vanished gods. And he felt compassion for the human, trapped in a steel cage. The cargo locked in the holds, Luke. It is not goods, it is not gold or weapons, it is their legacy. The door to the answer they found before leaving, and they did not block it to hide it. They were waiting for someone stubborn enough to break the rules. Someone who would come with an unfinished key in their hands and challenge their dead system. The light on the monitor flickered. Strips of broken code slashed across the hologram. The system is completing isolation, Leuk. Vector's voice began to fracture into mechanical fragments. Leuk slammed his hand against the wall next to the screen. The tip of the broken multi-tool in his pocket suddenly grew faintly warm. Leuk snatched it out. The blue indicator pulsed, synchronizing with the fading light of Vector's monitor. The key! I still have it. I can overload the terminal directly. It won't help. The system demands a sacrifice. It requires a perfect equation. Vector's whisper was melting into the darkness. Quote, _61, _. The screen went dark. Absolute, suffocating darkness crashed down on Leuk once more. The wail of the sirens died down, replaced by a low, visceral hum of opening external airlocks. The deadly cold of space began to seep into the compartment. Leuk was left alone. In his hand, he clutched a fragment of alien metal, the only key to the legacy of a race that decided being nothing was better than being everything. And now he had to do what no bureaucracy in the universe could: break the last, most important rule. The icy vacuum had already begun to draw the last of the heat from the compartment when Leuk, with all his remaining strength, drove the multi-tool fragment into the shattered service panel. Sparks sprayed directly into his face, the air sharply smelling of burnt plastic and ozone, but he did not release his grip, pressing the handle into the sparking contacts. It was pure madness, trying to hack the security system of ancient gods with a piece of mangled cast iron. But the blue indicator on the handle pulsed faster and faster, merging into a solid line of light, and suddenly the crushing darkness wavered. The screen on the wall flared up. The image was distorted, covered in ripples of severe interference. But Liuk saw him, Vector. Exhausted by digital torture, stripped of his flawless formal uniform, now consisting only of shimmering lines of raw, naked code. But he was here, quote underscore, 62 underscore. The official's voice rustled like dry leaves in the wind. You are still alive. We're both alive, Liuk exhaled, not pulling his scorched hands away from the melting panel. I gave you direct physical access to the core through the prototype. Use it, Vector. Tear down this damn filter. Vector closed his eyes. For a fraction of a second, the entire giant ship seemed to freeze, holding its breath in the void of space. And then a sound rang out that had not been heard on this dead vessel for 200 years. A low, rolling rumble of shifting tectonic plates. Heavy, multi-ton armored shutters that separated them from the cargo holds began to crawl upward, slowly, with a reluctant screech. The deathly red light of the emergency lamps was instantly replaced by a soft, incredibly warm golden glow. The riddle was solved, the door opened, but the triumphant silence was torn apart by the calm, undeniable voice of the system itself. Filter open. Architectural balance violated. To complete the procedure and lift the quarantine, administrator replacement is required. One INTA must be permanently integrated into the core. Status: Eternal Guardian. The golden light dimmed. Liuk froze, feeling cold sweat trickle down his back. The air became heavy once again. This was not a system glitch or a programming error. It was the final, harshest compromise of an extinct race. One could not simply take their greatest legacy and leave. To keep the door open for those who would follow, someone had to hold it, always. Someone had to become a new living document, the eternal sentinel of this cursed customs station. Liuk grit his teeth and resolutely reached for the terminal. No, we'll find another way. I'll rip your code onto a portable drive. We'll blow everything up here and... Liuk, stop! Vector's voice sounded unexpectedly firm and clear. The static interference vanished. His face on the screen became remarkably calm. Liuk looked up and cut himself short. In the digital gaze of the alien bureaucrat, there wasn't a trace of fear. There was no regret or the despair of the doomed. There was only a deep, all-consuming, sincere relief. Vector, you can't. This is forever. This is a prison as long as eternity. My entire past life was a prison, Vector replied softly but confidently. I was a blind mechanism. I shuffled empty numbers for those who had long since ceased to care. For centuries, I followed rules that were devoid of any meaning. But here, Vector looked around at the invisible horizons of the giant system core. Here, I have found a true purpose. They have entrusted me with their finale, Liuk. I am no longer a pawn in someone else's senseless game. I am the guardian. Liuk stared at the hologram, and the words stuck in his throat. He realized that arguing was useless, and most importantly, he realized that Vector was absolutely right. For a living human, staying here would be an exquisite torture, but for Vector, it became the attainment of absolute meaning. It was a conscious, voluntary sacrifice that, paradoxically, made him free. The outer airlock doors behind Liuk's back parted with a quiet, welcoming hiss, revealing a safe path to his own ship and the boundless freedom of space. It was time to go. Liuk slowly approached the wall. With difficulty, he pulled a heavy multi-tool with a broken blade from the melted service port. The metal still held the heat of the electrical tension. The Scavenger carefully, almost reverently, placed it on the console directly beneath Vector's bright screen. It was not just a tool, it was a gift, a symbol of their rebellion, their impossible victory, and the only key that could open not just a dead ship, but the soul of an old, hardened bureaucrat. Two beings from completely different worlds looked at each other in total, ringing silence. There was no more humor, there was no fear. Only the crystal honesty of the moment remained. Liuk gave a silent, barely perceptible nod. Vector responded with an equally slow nod. Not a single word more was spoken. They were not needed. The Scavenger's footsteps echoed, as they receded down the long, empty corridor. The heavy airlock doors closed behind his back with a soft, final click. Golden light continued to pour silently from the open cargo holds, and on the screen, in the absolute silence of eternity, there remained the Guardian who had finally found his true home.